Are you seeing it? Hi, I'm Kent and welcome to Turn a Wood Bowl. Do you see it? There's something interesting about this particular piece of wood. Now, this wood is a brand new species for me. This is cypress. I have never turned cypress. This came from a friend of mine, Brandon. Thank you, Brandon. I appreciate that. But there's something that I noticed with this blank that's pretty interesting. Stay tuned and I'm going to share with you and I'm going to see if you see it as well. I'm going to turn a closed rim bowl with this, a simple clean bowl. It just seems like a really nice grain pattern and I'm excited to see how this turns out. I'm going to once turn this. This wood doesn't feel super wet. I don't think that it's going to contract and distort too much. This is a quarter sawn section of wood. Now, if you want to learn more about quarter sawn turned bowls, then check out this video after you've watched this one. But I'm going to go ahead and get this mounted to the lathe and we're going to get started.
The first thing I'm noticing is I need to address this insect or worm infestation here. There's a bad corner of this, so I'm going to mount this so that I can turn away most of that on the bottom of the bowl. So that was a determining factor for which side would have the faceplate mounted to versus what will become the top rim of the bowl. I'm hoping that I can turn down into this and remove most of that material. Now I'm using a faceplate. I've got a impact driver that is great for driving these screws in. If you're using a standard drill, I highly recommend using an impact driver. It saves so much time and it does not strip out the screws. I'm also using Robinson screws. Those are the screws with the square hole. They don't slip as much as other screws typically do. Okay, so I'm going to get this mounted to the lathe. I'm going to clean up the face of this first and see what I'm dealing with. I like to get this surface leveled off and then I can mark the tenon and shape the bottom of the bowl. I'm using my 5/8 inch 55-degree bevel swept back bowl gouge. Now just to clarify, this is a 5/8 inch bowl gouge, which means that it is 5/8 inch in diameter of the shaft of the tool. The flute is 1/2 of an inch wide. I'm going to go ahead and use my dividers. Now I'm just using the left side of the dividers to make a mark, and I'm straddling that center and I'm checking to make sure that the right side of the dividers is over the line that gets scribed. You don't ever want that right side of the dividers to contact the wood because it's going to flip the dividers over pretty quickly and turn them into a flying weapon, and we don't want that. Okay, so I'm going to remove material here so that we get the shoulder set up, and then I'm going to shape that tenon. Just take your time and make nice light cuts. Now this is my 1/2 inch 55-degree bevel bowl gouge. These are basically my two workhorses. I go between the 5/8 inch, which I use for roughing, and the 1/2 inch. And now I'm bringing the tailstock up at this point because I want to mark that tenon. See that little mark right there? That's going to be really important later for recentering this on the lathe with the tailstock when I want to remove that foot. It's a really, really simple practice to get into. If you don't do it, it can be really tricky to center up the bowl when we go to address that foot later. But with a faceplate mount, you don't have to have the tailstock in place. It wouldn't be a bad idea to have it. With the tailstock out of the way right now, I have a little more flexibility to move around the curve of the base of the bowl. Now I'm just shifting my body weight. You do not want to be moving your hands or your arms at this point. I've got a video all about that you want to check out as far as your body mechanics and how you're moving when you're making cuts. If you notice my hand, and there's not much of it in the shot here, but my hand is not moving. I have that tool locked up against my body and I have my knees relaxed and I'm shifting my entire body weight from the right side to the left side and rotating to make that curve. I still have some holes here. A little worried about that. they're in there pretty good. I'm going to remove some more material and see if I can get this down a little bit deeper and hopefully get past those wormholes. I can just come down the shoulder and make the shoulder a little bit deeper, pull out a little bit of material here. I'm making a pull cut, and then I'll turn around and make a push cut. I still have worm issues down this deep. I'm going to turn around and do a push cut to level off that, match that pull cut that I just made. The pull cut is great for getting into those tight corners like we just did there. It's hard to start a push cut down in that corner that is a supported grain cut. Now, if you need to know more about supported grain direction, check out this video after this. You get done watching this one. The supported grain cut direction is super important to thoroughly understand. If you have bowls that are turning out rough, if the surface is rough and you can't figure out why, there's a good chance that you're not moving the bowl gouge in a supported grain direction, and that can cause all sorts of issues. So you're really going to want to understand the supported grain cut. I'm using a combination of a pull cut and a scraping cut here to remove material to shape the bottom curve of the bowl. This is not a refined cut. This is going to leave a relatively rough surface, but it helps me remove material quickly to get down to that shape. Now that you see that I'm closing the flute, this is a shear scrape. Now this is a refining cut, and this cleanly shaves the material and leaves a really nice finish. Let's take a look and see where we're at here. Wow, those wormholes are really in there. Uh-oh. Somebody's coming out. Oh, it is a termite. Yikes. All right, so this is what I was hoping it wouldn't be, but it is a termite. So, yeah, we don't want those in there. And I'm not seeing any others, but there's a chance there could be some others in there. I need to be a little bit cautious. I'm going to have to get these shavings off the floor quickly. And I'm going to need to contain this bowl so that if there are any other termites inside, that they don't escape and wander freely. I don't know how well they survive once they're outside the wood itself, but I don't want to take a chance, so I'm going to need to keep that aware. So I've shaped the curve. I need to take a little more material off the edge here, so I'm going to work this edge. I'm noticing there's a little bit of a split in there too. That usually happens near the pith side of a quarter sawn piece of wood. And I may need to do several passes here to get down beyond that split area. This again is my 1/2 inch. No, I'm sorry, this is my 5/8 inch bowl gouge. Just using this to rough away the surface. Now I'm at my 1/2 inch bowl gouge. The 1/2 inch bowl gouge, now, so in the United States, there's other countries that label these differently, and this gets called, I think in England, this is called a, okay, this would be a 3/8 inch bowl gouge, I think in England, don't quote me on that, but we call it a 1/2 inch bowl gouge. It has a 3/8 inch wide flute. The shaft of the entire tool is a 1/2 inch. That's the way we label them in the United States. Unfortunately, it's not a universal sizing on this. I wish everybody used the same description. You see, I still have that crack, and I do have other wormholes up here, so I'm going to flatten out this top rim first. I'm just going to use a scraping cut here. I'm going to be very careful with this and go slow, just nibble away the material. What I'm trying to do is get down to a continuous smooth rim so I can see where the top of the bowl might end up being. I do want to take some more material off here. See if I can get down below that crack. I don't want that crack to be visible and be exposed on the side of the bowl like that. So back to the sizing issue. So what I call a 5/8 inch bowl gouge and my 1/2 inch bowl gouge are considered in England, again, I believe this is correct. If anybody knows otherwise, please leave a comment and let me know. But in England, that would be a 1/2 inch bowl gouge and a 3/8 inch bowl gouge, because they size their tools based on the width of the flute, not the shaft of the tool. If you're ordering tools from overseas, you may see that difference, or you may order a 1/2 inch bowl gouge and it shows up and it's larger or smaller than what you imagined it might be, and that might be part of the reason. The way you can tell is to measure the diameter of the tool itself, the shaft of the tool, and the diameter or the width of the flute. So I'm going to make this a slightly closed rim. That means that the widest part of the bowl is going to be down below the rim, so that the rim will drop down to that high spot and then the base will come up to that high spot, meaning the rim is slightly narrower than the widest part of the bowl. That's considered a closed rim bowl. I need to go ahead and sharpen my tool. I'm going to go over to the sharpening station and set up my gouge using my depth gauge. I actually have that depth gauge plans for building that depth gauge like I use right there in my shop at my website. If you go to turnawoodbowl.com/shop, you'll see that there. And what's nice about this gauge is there is a little secret inside. You can see it sometimes. There's a little secret inside that maintains this accuracy. I use a 2-inch depth, and you can do an 1 3/4 depth as far as your extension, but I like to do a 2-inch depth. That gives me a little more clearance when I'm doing these deep drops of the tool, as you see here. I found that an 1 3/4 makes the jig itself actually rub the wheel, and I try not to do that. So now with a really nice sharp bowl gouge, I'm going to shear scrape this curve and really give it a nice smooth shape. You can see I'm watching the top of the bowl, just like you're seeing here. The top of the bowl is, I'm just working these really nice smooth curve. I'm looking for any high spot and kind of concentrating just a little bit more in those high spots so that I get a nice fluid curve. Wow, those wormholes just don't want to go away. I'm hoping this doesn't turn out too bad. Now I've repositioned the tool rest and I'm doing the shear scrape from the other direction to take that high spot off the top area. Now you want to position the tool rest so it's almost perpendicular, so it supports the bowl gouge a lot differently rather than you would if you're making a push or pull cut. If you're making a push or pull cut, you want that tool rest to be right up against your turning, and the tool's going to be right up near it. But you can see here I'm about 90 degrees because I've dropped that handle and I have such little contact with the tool. I'm basically shaving that surface, so I don't need a ton of support from the tool rest. I just don't want to try to do a push cut like that because I have a lot of bowl gouge extended beyond the tool rest. That's something we don't want. So I'm going to get in here with my spindle detail gouge and shape the tenon, and we'll get this off the lathe. I'm going to pull off the faceplate. Again, that impact driver is so handy. They're readily available. Pretty much every manufacturer has impact drivers now, and they work so well. I keep reusing the same screws over and over again because I don't rip them out like I used to do with the drill driver. The drill driver, especially the harder woods or the wet woods, the screws would just lock in there, and sometimes they would break off, which was a big hassle. Okay, so now with the bowl reversed and mounted to the 4-jaw chuck, I'm going to turn away the face of this. I like to level this off so I've got a nice, smooth, even blank. Usually at this point, the blank is really balanced, and you can get the lathe speed up a bit. Don't want to get going too fast with a bowl. Now I'm also going to shape the rim here. Now the rim's not going to be that wide, but I want to establish the angle. I like doing a flat top rim, but I like to angle it down into the bowl as you just saw there. The wall thickness will be much thinner, but I still have that angled rim that drops down into the bowl. And that's a preference. You can shape the rim however you'd like. You can make it completely flat, you can round it over, you can do whatever you'd like to do with that. Now here, I'm showing you this camera angle because what I'm doing is I'm lining up the bevel of the bowl gouge with the exterior of the bowl. And I'm also keeping my head very close to this angle. So I want to look down on this piece. I want to see that that bevel is parallel with the outside wall and just lightly go in and make a cut. Now, the tip of the bowl gouge will disappear from my view, but I was just watching its path, and I can visualize where that's going to go to a degree. I'm not taking this and making a long sweeping cut all the way across the bottom. I'm just doing small sections at a time. Then I come back and remove some of this material. I call it ditch material. It's like a ditch or a canyon that's there. I remove some of that material, and then I'll go back to that side wall. Now here's the important thing with the thin turning like this. Once I establish that wall thickness and I've created what I want up towards the rim of the inside of the bowl, there's actually a lot of moisture in here. You can see it shining there. Once I've created that wall thickness up towards the top, I will not go all the way back to the top of that rim. And the reason for that is it's flexing. It's going to move around, and I do not want that to impact the bowl gouge. I've seen a lot of people blow up bowls because they'll get the bowl almost finished and they decide, you know, I want to go back up to that rim and change the shape of it, or I want to take a little bit off the top of the bowl so it's not so big, or whatever reason it is, you go back to that rim. And if you go back to that rim and it's thin and you have nothing in the inside, this core in the center right here is creating some support, but right now there's enough removed that that top rim is flexing and moving around. If you do that, if I bring the tool up to that rim right now, what's going to happen is I'm going to most likely break the entire bowl. See, now I'm up higher, but I'm merging these cuts together. What'll happen is if you touch that tool to the rim, the flex and the vibration that's happening on the bowl is just simply going to break that wood apart, and you're going to have pieces of wood flying. It's a very common thing. So now what I'm doing here is like I have the thickness established at the rim and the bottom is thicker, and that's what you want. And then what we're going to do is you're just going to lightly reduce the thickness lower. So you see I start off where I'm almost removing no material, and then I'm taking off more material as I get lower. So I'm increasing the depth of the cut, and that is slowly sneaking up on the thickness of the wall. So I have a continuously thick wall all the way down. I'm just sneaking up on the ideal wall thickness. What you don't want to do is you don't want to get aggressive and make deep cuts, because you can cut through the bowl towards the bottom, or you might make the area lower thinner than it is up at the rim, and we definitely don't want that. If the bowl isn't evenly thick all the way through, you at least want the bottom of the bowl to be a little bit thicker than the rim. But the ideal situation is the wall thickness is the same from the rim all the way down to the bottom. So I'm going to remove some of the core in the center here. And the reason I use this process of working from the rim out is, number one, I do a lot of natural edge and live edge pieces, and you really need to establish the wings of a natural edge and a live edge bowl first. And I've found that working from the rim down just works great for that. And there's no reason to not do it for a regular round bowl as well. It gives you a lot of control, a lot of stability. That center mass inside the bowl, when you're working the rim, really holds everything tight and prevents that rim from flexing. So now I'm just sneaking up to that bottom thickness. You want to stop frequently and check that wall thickness as well. Don't want to go too far and then cut it too deep. So now it's a little bit thick at the bottom and tapers up to the rim. And so I'm going to do the same thing where I'm making these tapering cuts. I'm just rubbing the bevel here and making a really light shave that gets a little bit deeper towards the bottom. I'm going to clear this out because I pretty much want to get up to the center portion of this. The other thing you want to know about the inside of the bowl here is don't rip or don't push hard across the center of the bottom here, because you're going to tear out ingrained fibers and you can leave a little divot in the bottom of the bowl. So slow your cut down right here and just let the tool cut those fibers away. And if you're liking this video, do me a huge favor and click that like button. It helps out this video and the channel. That's looking pretty good. It's feeling a little thick down there still, and you can see that little line where I need to remove material. Again, I'm just rubbing the bevel lightly and starting with a really light shaving cut that increases towards the bottom, because the bottom is thicker than my side, and that's how we sneak up on the wall thickness. There's actually a lot more moisture in this piece than I originally thought. Now keep in mind, I'm wearing a full respirator right now, and I have my air filtration working. There's moisture in this, and it's actually sticking to the sanding disc. I'm using the mesh sanding discs, and that gives me the ability to blow out some of those shavings that build up, and I can reuse this disc. If I were using a paper pad, it would basically clog up very quickly. Okay, so I'm going to mount my jam chuck. If you want to know about jam chucks and you need to make your own jam chuck, I've got a great video on that you might want to check out. With the bowl mounted to the lathe, I'm going to remove the shoulder and part of the tenon. I'm going to allow this whole area to become the foot of the bowl. Now, this was nice and wide, which gave me great support while I was turning it, but I don't need all this material here. And aesthetically, I want the bowl to look lighter and quite not as heavy as it appeared with that thick shoulder and blade. So, and I'm also taking some of the height down. I don't need a foot that's quite that tall. A part of the result, or the reason for that, was the fact that I had to remove that extra material trying to get down below those wormholes. So now I'm going to make some light shear scrapes here to merge those areas together so it flows continuously with the curve of the bowl. Just going to take your time here. It's looking pretty good. I need to sand that. There's a visible edge there, but it's very subtle, and with a little bit of sanding that can be removed. Now I'm doing, with my 1/2 inch 55-degree bevel swept back bowl gouge, I'm doing a reverse scraping cut to establish the thickness of the foot. I try to make the foot as thick as the walls of the bowl. That way the wood is even throughout the entire piece. Now I'm also removing the material inside this foot, so it's going to be a little bit thicker, but the ideal situation is the thickness in the center bottom of that foot is the same as the rim, as the foot, everything. And the reason for that is the water or the moisture in this, which it turns out there was quite a bit of moisture in here, more than I thought. That moisture will escape the wood evenly. If I have a very thick area and a thin area, that thick area is going to hold moisture longer than the thin area. The thin area will dry out, the thick area will still have moisture in it, and guess what? That's where there's stress and cracks occur. So the even thickness is super important, and it's something you really want to spend the time to achieve, because it's going to prevent the cracking that you're seeing in bowls. If you're leaving large, thick bottoms or bases on your bowls and the walls are relatively thin, you're probably experiencing some cracking, and that's the reason. So I'm going to use my spindle detail gouge and just whittle away this little nub, and I'm going to apply some forward pressure, turn the lathe off, and shear right through that last part of the nub. All right, it's looking pretty good. I've got to sand that small area on the bottom of the foot. And then I'm going to apply some Danish oil. Now this is tried and true's Danish oil. I've got a video all about finishes that you're going to want to check out so you can learn more about this. And you can see why I like using this. This is 100% boiled linseed oil. And this is not chemically cooled or chemically treated in any way. Most of the large manufacturers or the box stores that sell quote-unquote Danish oil are selling, first of all, Danish oil can have a variety of different products in it, and typically they are made in large quantities that have to be cooled using metal and using other different types of chemical treatments. the tried and true Danish oil that I use is not, there's nothing added to it. It's 100% linseed oil, and it is boiled the old way that has been done for a very long period of time. So check out that video and you'll learn more information about finishing. Look at this wood grain. This is absolutely gorgeous, and this is what I wanted you guys to see. Are you seeing this? Are you seeing the evenness in this wood grain? It's incredible. Now, those wormholes are a bit of an issue. I haven't seen any more termites, and I'm hoping I don't have any more in there, obviously. But look at the evenness of the grains in this wood. It's absolutely gorgeous. Cypress is very slow growing, and this is just a gorgeous, gorgeous piece. I'm really, really happy with it, even despite those wormholes. And that's what I wanted you to see right there. Look at the evenness in those grains. We're going to talk about that in just a second. Beautiful piece. I'm very happy with this.
So did you see it? No, I don't mean the termite. The termite's not a great thing. And actually the termite was a good indicator of what species of cypress this is. There are two types of cypress where I am. There is the bald cypress and the pond cypress. The pond cypress is insect resistant. Unfortunately, the bald cypress is not. So there's a good indication this is probably a bald cypress. And it's an old growth, or what I consider an old growth. I'm seeing at least 75 growth rings on this tree, so it's pretty old, and I don't know, I don't have a whole section of this, so I don't know how old this tree truly is. But what's really interesting, and I don't know if you saw it, but these growth rings are super consistent. Now there are variations, there are gaps in here where there's really tight ones, but all in all they're very consistent, and the growth is very small each year. So the cypress is a very slow growing tree, but what would make it so consistent? Let's think about this for a second. The cypress tree likes to grow in water. Yes, it grows in the water, and it sends up what are called knees, which are part of the root system that come up above the water. And because it's in water all the time, it has more consistent growth patterns. Now, there are probably times when those water levels drop down too low and it's not getting as much water as it needs. And you can see some of these shorter, even smaller sections of growth rings. But all in all, it's very consistent. And if you think about the fact that a lot of trees that we see, the growth rings, they can be all over the place. Some are really wide, some are really narrow, and it's a good indication of the water in those locations. Now, I'm wondering if the people that study trees to understand how our climate used to be, and I don't know the name for that. If anybody knows the name for that, leave that in the comment below. I appreciate that. I'm sure there's a study, that's an actual scientific study of trees. And I think somebody mentioned it in a video a while back. So if you know what that is, leave it in the comments. Anyway, the people that study these trees, it would be interesting to talk with them and find out if cypress are different in that they can determine other climate conditions other than just water levels, because it seems like the water levels on a typical deciduous tree that grows in the ground would pretty much indicate how much water there was for that given year. But if the cypress is pretty much consistently getting water except for a handful of years, are there other conditions that determine or change those width of growth rings other than the water? Interesting question. I just love trees, and I love posing these questions because I think we don't know a lot about trees, and I still think there's a lot going on out there that make trees just absolutely fascinating. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I think the bowl turned out great. I think for the first turning of a piece of cypress, this has worked out really well, and I like the way it turned. It cut very smooth. It's got a really nice, clean, smooth finish, and I love those tight grains. This would be great for a wooden box, something that you need a little bit of precision for. Now, I do need to be cautious with that termite and the potential for other termites in here. So what I'm gonna do with this bowl, the size is just right. I'm gonna drop this into a Ziploc bag. Now, the Ziploc bag is gonna do nothing more than contain any little critters that are in here right now. And Yeah, there's limited oxygen in here, but those guys don't need much oxygen, and I don't think this is going to suffocate them. What the intention of that is just to contain them, and if they decide to come out, they're going to be at the bottom of that bag, and I'll be able to see if there's any more termites in there. We obviously don't want termites. Now, the shavings that came off this bowl, I may put those out in the yard somewhere way away from trees and any other wood source and just let them dry out, which would most likely kill those termites, because the cypress shavings are actually really nice to use for mulch and that. So I may be doing that. If I don't do that, I'll probably have to burn them. I really don't want to burn them. It seems like a waste because it's cypress after all. Cypress is used in mulch, which that's another question. Maybe somebody out there knows that too, is how in the world do we take these beautiful slow-growing cypress trees and mulch them down for mulch that we can buy at a hardware store? In the United States, we can buy mulch cypress relatively cheap, and we use it around our gardens and our flower beds. How is that? I'm guessing that there's farms and these are not old growth trees, but still, it seems somewhat odd. So anyway, just a question that pops into my mind, and I don't know if you guys are like me, but I'm always wondering about things like that. So all right, guys, I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have, do me a huge favor, click that like button. Be sure you're subscribing if you're not already subscribing. There's a large percentage of people that view my videos that aren't subscribing, and that just seems odd. So go ahead and subscribe as well, and click that bell, and you'll be notified when my next video comes out, which I've got tons of great videos for you and everything you need to know about turning wood bowls. If you want to learn a ton more, go over to my website, turnawoodbowl.com. Over there, I've got everything you need, tons of articles, and I have online courses. You can start studying tool sharpening, how to turn a bowl, how to deal with green wood, and how to master your bowl gouge right now by going over to turnawoodbowl.com. So check it out. All right, guys, thank you so much for watching. And as always, until next time, happy turning.